Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Deningris. I'm a visual effects artist, filmmaker, and film educator. I have made independent films. I've worked on visual effects for film and TV, and I've taught digital filmmaking at the university level for about 2 decades. Now I run a boutique visual effects studio called Foxtrot X-Ray, and we specialize in serving independent filmmakers and helping them use visual effects to tell their stories. And that's what this podcast is about, the intersection between visual effects and independent films. Welcome to the VFX for Indies podcast. With me today are David Stipes, visual effects supervisor for Star Trek The Next Generation, and Rick Ravenell, 2D supervisor for Star Trek Picard. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Oh, excellent. Good to be here.
Great to be here, Paul. Thanks.
I'm connected to these two gentlemen at sort of opposite ends of my career. David and I worked at an animation studio here in Phoenix, Arizona called Rainbow Studios pretty early on in my career. We were working for a couple of fellas who had left Hollywood after working on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Voyager, and other shows like that. They had come to Arizona to start a little animation studio and develop some film and TV projects. And they brought some Star Trek alumni that they were connected with, such as John Eves, who did some ship design for some of the projects that we worked on, and Mr. Stipes here, who quickly became a dear friend and one of my VFX mentors, and somebody that I routinely dial up when I can't figure something out. I say, "Hey, David, give me some tips. What kind of magic did you guys do back in the day?" And it's been a wonderful relationship since then. I guess we've probably known each other close to 25 years now, David.
Yeah, close to it. Yeah.
And then shortly after I left Rainbow Studios, I entered academia. Long story there, but I started teaching at a private college here in Arizona, and Rick was one of my students for a number of years, and I pretty quickly realized that Rick had what it took to be successful in the VFX industry. And I said, dude, you need to move to Los Angeles. Not all my students ever listened to that advice, but Rick certainly did, and he went out there and has been kicking ass out there since 2009-ish?
Yeah, about
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I did. I just packed up and moved to LA and hope for the best.
Well, that was a brave but right thing to do. That was the right thing to do.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Great advice.
Thanks. Like I said, not everybody took it, but you definitely did. You know, I just pointed at the door. You walked through it and then started running, and I've been in awe of your career since then, and have like I tell you all the time when I see you, I'm just always so proud of you and everything that you've accomplished, and you've just taken it to levels that I could not have imagined when I gave you that advice all those years ago.
Thanks, man. The
title of the episode is Lessons from Star Trek, and that's because these two gentlemen have worked at opposite ends of the Star Trek The Next Generation legacy. David, way back at the beginning when TNG was first on, and then Rick most recently with Picard Season 3 with the ostensibly the conclusion of the TNG crew and the TNG story. And I thought, what a great opportunity to really explore the franchise and kind of, the lessons that independent filmmakers could learn from even something as big and established as Star Trek. The question is, what does Star Trek have to teach independent filmmakers? And like I always say, it doesn't matter whether you're doing a $50,000 character-based drama, 2 people sitting in a room, or you're doing $1 million an episode space opera. Time and money are always the enemy, right? They're always the enemy to creativity. They're the limiting factor. They're always the enemy to achieving exactly what you want. So we're always being asked to do more with less. Doesn't matter what the budget level. So there's always lessons to be learned. And really, when you think about it, Star Trek began as a bunch of people in homemade costumes in a pretty cheap looking set with just the spirit of can-do optimism. If that doesn't describe the average independent film, I don't know what does. So before we dive into that, David, why don't you give everybody just the quick non-Trek highlights of your career?
I got fascinated with visual effects with King Kong when I was a little kid, asking my mom how to do that, because I knew something was going on. And of course she said, oh, it's a trained chimpanzee. And of course, I immediately knew that wasn't right. Didn't know what it was, but I knew that wasn't it. And then so it started getting me curious. In the 60s, I discovered monster magazines and Forrest J. Ackerman, Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine. And of course, then I got to discover Ray Harryhausen, Willis O'Brien, and all of the stop motion wonders that they brought forth. So that really was a drive to get involved. Before I got out of high school, I'd actually worked on my first feature film as a model maker, and got my first experiences with the horrors or the disappointments of working on models and having them left in the rain. And when it came to collect my beautiful prize, it was a puddle of rubble and stuff, things like that. I'm actually old enough, and I'm going to rot right in front of your faces here, right in front of your screen. I'm old enough that I actually did apply to work on the original Star Trek. I was as green as could be, and they patted me on the head and say, yeah, go away, come, grow a little more, come back. And it took me 25 years to be an overnight success and go to work on Next Generation, because that's how long I had to plod along and work along. And I had my own studio. I did get a chance to work on Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers and, a few things like that. So, but got on to Next Generation season 6, and then worked on 7. We did that great All Good Things episode and got an Emmy for that. Then went on to Voyager, and we got an Emmy for the first episode of that one, the first pilot. And it just kept moving forward to Next Generation. Next Generation Voyager, then Deep Space Nine. So I finished off Deep Space Nine, moved out to Arizona, where I was working with Paul at Rainbow Studios. I worked on a lot of independent films here in Arizona. And so I've had a chance to work with a lot of pretty green people here and pretty seasoned people. And I know that Paul has, I think, run into some of the same kind of phenomena too, with local filmmakers who have very high aspirations. So I've been blessed to be able to work there and be able to bring some help to the people. I will interject that I also got into academia and was teaching visual effects at a different school. And some of my students wound up, 3 or 4 of them took the opportunity to move to Hollywood, and they're doing their thing too and being successful. So,
well, thanks, David. Obviously, you've got incredible depth and breadth of experience, and your students just must have absolutely been blown away by what you brought to your classroom experience. And any of them that followed your advice to go pursue a career must be doing really well. And as a fellow professor, that's the coolest thing to see your I call everybody my kids. Rick is certainly older than my kids, but I call them all my kids. And
we cherish their successes. Absolutely.
It's so awesome. So with that's a great segue. Rick, tell us what you've been up to since moving out to LA.
Yeah. So, my visual effects stuff started when I was a kid. We always went to the movie theaters every week. That was like our family get together. It didn't matter what was playing. We'd just go there. This is back when we had newspapers. You had to pick out a movie, go there, and then hope something was there. And we just watched movies. And then my dad always watched movies when he'd come home from work. Same with my mom. She'd be sitting there knitting an Afghan, watching Star Trek or Star Wars or whatever it is, And so that's what I grew up watching, is just tons of sci-fi. So in school, I was primarily an art history major, doing drawing, painting, printmaking, and all that kind of stuff. And my dad was like, being an artist, probably not going to make you any money. I don't want you to be a starving artist. I want you to have a career. But you play a lot of video games on this computer thing that you have. Maybe you can kind of do art on the computer. And that's sort of what led me to visual effects. It's like, well, I want to work on movies. I want to work on TV shows. How do I put these two things together? So I did all my general education in Hawaii, learning, again, painting, printmaking, and all that. And then I moved to Arizona to University of Advanced Technology, where I met Paul, and basically was like, is this a thing? Like, is compositing real? Like, is visual effects real? Because I had no idea what any of that stuff was. I went to UAT without a direction, and I got my direction from Paul. And that was very special, because he's like, this is what you can do. If you want to do it, go to LA. So I did, went to LA. First thing I worked on was Knight Rider in 2008, which was a TV show with NBC. And what else came out in 2008? Iron Man. So everybody's all excited about heads-up displays and graphics and clear screens and all of that. And I thought that stuff was great. So they were like, hey, can you make any of this stuff? Sure, why not? Had no idea how to make it. Just kind of faked it till I got there. So I got to do tons of graphics and motion graphics work for that show, but I also got to composite everything together. So I got to own all of my shots from beginning to end, which is really special. And that just sort of propelled my career. You know, I did graphics on Avatar, which was super fun. Didn't get to do any comp on that, but it did hide my face in every single shot that I did and put my name in there. So that was really fun. And then since then, been jumping around to different studios doing motion graphics and compositing work. Some of the movies I worked on, After Earth and Ender's Game. And most recently, I am now the compositing supervisor and the head of 2D at Outpost, and where we were working on Star Trek.
Well, thanks, Rick. That's a pretty awesome career so far, and it's kind of amazing. Like I think when I went to visit you when you had just started at Outpost, I said, yeah, give it a year, you'll be running this place. You basically were.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, I was.
So that's pretty awesome.
I was skeptical.
And then you told me you were working on Picard, and I got very, very excited. And Picard season 3 was everything a Star Trek fan like me, who's been a fan since before TNG, since I would say probably since I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, when original Trek was already in reruns. And when the motion picture came out, I was super excited and had to go see that opening weekend, and then just followed the original crew through all their movies and books and comics and all kinds of stuff. And I built a model of the Enterprise A when I was a kid and had it hanging from my ceiling. So I've been a dyed-in-the-wool Trekkie from a long time ago. And I have always said that the original ending of Next Gen, All Good Things, is the gold standard for series finales. Like it's when I think about series finales, that is always the number one. They stuck the landing in every possible way. And so I was nervous going into Picard season 3, because modern Trek has kind of, broken my heart a little bit since 2009, since the JJ reboot. I was never really happy with those movies.
I was so depressed.
I didn't love Discovery when it first came on. And even Picard season 1 and 2 they were okay. They were kind of iffy. There was some story problems, some characterization problems. So I went into season 3 cautiously optimistic. And when I heard they were bringing everybody back from the Next Gen crew, I was like, well, now I have to watch it just for the sake of completeness, because it'd be nice to visit with old friends. I follow all of the TNG crew on all the socials, and it's like they literally are that family that we see on TV. They literally are that tight, and you want to root for them. You want their stuff to be good. You want them to, go out in a blaze of glory, and they certainly did with Picard season 3. The crowning moment, I guess, of Picard season 3 was the resurrection of the Enterprise D, coming back into action after being lovingly restored by Geordi. David, did you? I assume you stayed up with Picard season 3. Did you watch it?
I've got through season 1 and 2. I did pick up the reveal of the new Enterprise and then the battle and all of that. So yes, I saw some of the key moments. I will eventually pick up the rest of the show, but you were asking if I felt nostalgic about it, and in a way I was. It was like when the doors open and stuff, you say, I'm going like, wow, that poor baby looks a little rough for wear. But, I love seeing it. I am going to squawk a little bit. It's like, I didn't know that Geordi was such a tinkerer that he could get his old Thunderbird or old Mustang out in the garage put back together so well by himself. So how in the heck did Geordi resurrect this ship off of the planet, get it into orbit? That was kind of a story issue. It has nothing to do with the visuals, but the visuals were awesome. So Rick, were you involved in that shot at all?
Not the initial reveal of it, but we did the shot where it warps in front of Jupiter.
Oh yeah, that was great. Yeah. The CGI work I think was really nice. And so, yes, I thought it was really nostalgic, and I love the moves. The moves were, very Enterprise, very Next Generation. So yeah, everyone did a good job. I just kind of I want to elbow the writers a little bit, like, yeah, come on, guys.
He used a healthy dose of hand wavium
Yeah,
to
right.
get the ship fixed up.
Yeah, Geordi's really great, the best of the engineers.
Absolutely. Replicators can do a lot.
Yeah, those droids must have been really busy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Rick, as you guys were working on shots with the Enterprise D, were you guys like pinching yourselves? Were people like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever? Or was it just another day at the office?
I mean, we were really lucky that we had two like diehard Star Trek fans on the show. Our producer, she worked on the remaster, and so did one of our CG soups. So they were putting in so much extra effort like all the time because they were like, guys, this is going to be so cool. Like, you have no idea. So everybody else, they liked working on it because it was sci-fi and it was fun, but they didn't know like how much it meant to like these two people. And those two people were like driving the whole show and the production of it. So
Who were the two people that were you talking about?
it was Melissa DeLong and
Mhm.
Ramel Calderon.
Okay.
Is the he's the CG soup, and she was the producer.
Thank you.
And they loved it. Like, they were so excited about it. Like, Ramel
Oh, God,
has
yeah.
a company called Horner Shipyards who does maquettes for ships. So he 3D prints ships and does all the decal work and sends them out. And he even knew the designer of the Titan in Picard, Bill Krause. So they both are connected and they talk all the time. And so he was so excited just to even be part of the project, but then to work on the Enterprise D was just like the crowning achievement like in his career.
I was in awe and humbled when I realized working on this show, on all of these Star Trek shows, just as you are, Rick, you are now a part of cinema history. You are a part of something that will never go away.
Yeah.
And this is
Pretty
part
phenomenal.
of your heritage that you get to pass on to fans and people who are not even born yet. And so it's a wonderful gift, a gift from the universe to you, but from you to everyone else. So if you don't mind me being a little metaphysical there.
No, it's really special. And to be honest, we didn't know what it was going to be like while we were working on it, because we worked on season 2 as well.
Mhm.
And, it had its ups and downs, but we were all still excited. And then season 2 came out and they're like, okay, well, I guess they're doing season 3. Maybe this season 3, this is the one, it'll be great. So we, everybody put in their effort, and we weren't sure what it was going to turn out like. And especially the final episodes, the amount of work we put into that stuff, it was really rewarding to see just the fans' reaction to it. Like, Reddit exploded. Like, a bunch of our friends are all over it, and we were like, I couldn't believe it. Like, it was really surprised. Like, people were sharing like gifs of my shots on the internet. Stuff that like I had supervised, stuff that I personally worked on. And I was like,
Mhm.
I don't know, it doesn't get any better than that, right? Like, it's
No,
pretty
it
awesome.
doesn't. Wait till they start doing memes and stuff of it, though.
Yeah, exactly.
I have some of my shots that are actually memes and are little snippets of like, oh, this is so cool, that kind of thing. Hopefully you'll get some of that kind of stuff.
My favorite TNG meme is Picard face palming, but I don't think VFX had anything to do with that one.
Oh, mine is the Android data plan, where he's got the phone inside of his body, from Phantasm episode.
That one's fun. Yeah, that one's good.
That's like, hey, that's my shot. And it's a meme. Yay.
It's a meme. Right on. So yeah, David, give us a kind of like an overview of sort of how an Enterprise shot would have been accomplished back in the original TNG days.
A bulk of my work was done with the physical model. I can do a whole nother little section on the CGI aspect of it, but most of it was done on the model, which was a 4-foot Enterprise. They did one, I think it was about 9 or 11 feet long, but that was so ungainly to work with. I never got a chance to work with that. So it was a great gene model. So we would get the script. Immediately you would start breaking down, highlighting every one of the shots, and then you can and almost immediately you could determine like, that's going to be a stock shot. Oh, no, that's stock. Okay, now the Enterprise needs to come and do something. Okay, that's going to have to be new. So then you highlight that. And I'm a insane storyboard guy. I storyboard everything, which is one of my pet rah things to do. And I was working with usually Joe Bauer, who went on to great fame on Game of Thrones. And so he went on and did a great thing on his own. But he was my coordinator assistant. So he and I would talk about what was needed, and we would start working out how many hours was it going to take to do this shot, and where were we going to, film it. Usually it was done at a place called Image G, which was a motion control facility just a couple miles away from Paramount. And then we'd go over and shoot. It was then transferred usually at CIS, Composite Image Systems, CIS, and from film to digital, usually a D1 format. And then we would take it over to Digital Magic or one of the similar facilities, Pacific Ocean Post later on, that sort of thing. And they would be composited. Okay. The models were, you would have multiple passes. You would have a beauty pass. You would have, each one of these was programmed with a motion control setup, which is computer controlled. And you would do the beauty pass. You would do a pass with just interior lights. There was the engine lights. There was the Bassard, those little red lights at the ends of the nacelles. And there was also the deflector light at the top. And then there was the blinkies, the navigation lights. And each one was a separate pass. And then they would roll up this gigantic orange screen, bring out black light, and blast the heck out of it. And they would make a silhouette pass against orange, which is quite unusual. And it's the equivalent in film for what we've been doing lately in green screen and the older blue screen. But it was very, very efficient, very, very efficient. All of those things come together. We would take them down. They would all be composited. Don Greenberg did a great deal of compositing at the facilities on all the different episodes. There was a couple other people, but Don did a bulk of it. Does that kind of answer your question?
Absolutely.
Or have I bored you to tears?
No, and I don't want to go into too technical a deep dive because that's not really the audience here. Mm-hmm. There's tons of other podcasts for like technical deep dives into stuff. I just wanted to give our audience just kind of like a flavor of sort of the process because
there's a point I do want to make though, and it's relevant to segueing into CGI. When we were doing the motion control, we were lucky if we could get if we're really pushing hard and maybe we could overlap in similar moves or something, maybe you can get 4 shots in a day, usually 2 or 3. And that was fine until we ran into, shows that needed, 100 ships in it and they had to be original moves. Now, how do you do that with motion control? Okay. So I'll leave that as an open question.
I see a lot of parallels, as I listened to you talk about the different passes and I saw Rick nodding his head.
Yeah, you probably do
a lot
that too.
Of similarity to how we still do, ship composites and any CG composites. So, Rick, would you just comment again, really briefly, and you don't have to go super technical because, again, that's not our audience.
David blew it up.
No, not at all. I think the way you explained it was such that even somebody who's not super technical could understand, could follow it. Rick and we could geek out on like file formats and AOVs and all kinds of like acronyms and stuff like that and lose the entire audience. But Rick, I'm just going to pass it to you to give us kind of like the overview. Imagine a similar enterprise shot for Picard. Yeah, similar to the process that David just spoke about.
Yeah, so there are a ton of similarities. We start with storyboards and then storyboards go into the animators and they'll do like a quick sort of a blocking animation of flight paths and, because we have to make sure it feels, large and heavy. You can't be making these crazy moves and things like that. And a lot of our reference is the stuff that, you worked on, David. They sent us tons and tons of reference of that stuff. And because we had, again, 2 diehard Trek fans, they're like, it would not do that. This is what it would do, So they would help, art direct and guide the animation process. And then when we get into 3D, a lot of our 3D passes are very similar to the ones you mentioned. Like Paul mentioned, they're AOVs for us. So we did separate ones for the nav lights, for the ship interior lights, any of the nacelle lights, and all that stuff. Like we rendered them all separately because our showrunner was such a huge fan of Next Generation that he had a very specific look of what he wanted the ships to look like. He's like, I hate Discovery. I hate J.J. Abrams. I hate all this other stuff. So we're changing the way this all works, right? So that was the biggest challenge for us, is trying to make a ship that looks like a model, but is better, like quote unquote better, because we're like, oh, cool. Like, do they want them to look like this one show where they have reflections and it's all very shiny? And they're like, no, don't want that. Then we made them that were really flat, and they're like, nope, too flat. Look at the models. Go back and look at the models and make it look like a model, but then put your extra fancy stuff on top of it. And that was kind of how we ended up with what Picard looks like. We were very lucky that we were the first company to nail the look for the ship, so we passed the ship looks out to the rest of the entire team. But we did all of our look dev on the Titan, which then, we did look dev on the Enterprise, and we passed that off to everybody, and everybody had to match our stuff.
One of the advantages that Rick has that I didn't with a model, a physical model needs to have a mount that it's resting on. And so you can't put the camera down there if you see the mount. So Rick is at a place and a point where a camera could start looking up at the Enterprise, go up over the top, and go down and look down on the Enterprise all in one shot. And I never could. Because there's a point where, oops, I see the model mount now, and I can't go any farther. So yeah, you got a lot of freedom with the CGI, and boy, you guys nailed that look. Your model work is really great. Really, my compliments.
And that means a lot coming from you, man. Appreciate it.
Well, I know how hard it was, man.
It definitely evoked, the classic movies, especially like the space dock sequences and stuff. It evoked, Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, them stealing the Enterprise from space dock, and all of that sort of stuff. And obviously we have a lot more freedom. We can iterate a lot faster than you could back in the TNG days, David. But that sometimes contributes to the weightless feeling of CGI. The idea that the camera can do anything, the model can do anything. It sounds to me like the showrunner on Picard maybe gave you guys some more limitations to try and make it feel more like the classical model photography that the franchise was built on.
Well, that was always one of my mottos that I try to hammer with students, is that, if you want it to look real, shoot it like a real camera, and don't go doing any crazy, moves that a real camera couldn't do.
Yeah, and I think that's super important. Like, if you can start there with like, how would you shoot this for real? And then expand on it.
You got it.
Oh, it'd be cool if we could just do this little bit and then put that in there. Then you're already 80% based in reality, and it doesn't break that, that feeling of like, well, this is obviously fake.
Yeah. You got it. Yeah, you guys are right on it.
Yeah. The ships in Picard always felt real and felt like they had scale.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I appreciated too was, back on TNG, the windows were always just lights, except for a couple of, hero windows where there was something, built in there or comped in there. But it looked like on Picard, you guys actually like put cabins and the rec room and things like that behind the windows. And
I saw that. I was just going like, wow, you can actually see into it. That was really cool. Yeah, actually, I did remark to myself about how neat that was. Nicely done.
Yeah, we had a couple of shots where we got really, really close to the ships, and we had one of our artists, Bill. He modeled out the whole interiors for that stuff when we flew past it, and made sure it was all realistic, because he's a model guy, right? So he's like, I'm gonna make this stuff look awesome. So I'm like, it's gonna be like this big, and like, but they're gonna notice. I guarantee you, someone's gonna notice.
I noticed,
and you guys did.
Yeah, absolutely. Did, so. And of course, the extra trick for you is that you actually can do it in perspective. Yeah, at best we had was a little slide back there, a little transparency, which it can go under the eave or something, but you can't. It doesn't slide around, and you don't see a displacement of any of the furniture, which it does in yours.
Yeah, very cool. So let me ask each of you, what's the hardest Trek shot, the most challenging Trek shot that either of you worked on in your time with the franchise?
I can go for like the most challenging one that we had. Hopefully everybody's seen Picard season 3. There's a big explosion at the end. That was an insane shot because
that was insane.
Yeah, like the pure scale of the cube. We made it in real scale. So
Oh my
we could
God.
get really close to it, and we modeled everything in there. And then so blowing that up and figuring out the simulations and all that is just insane to figure it out. Because we had a couple people that was their only job, was work on this cube and make this cube as best as possible. And then we get into compositing, which is the department that I'm in charge of. And they're like, okay, here's all of our stuff. Please make this work and look better, which is essentially what happened, right?
Yeah.
So we went back and we started pulling tons of 2D elements as well to layer in on it to make it feel like, okay, so these explosions, like how big is this explosion really? You know, well, if you think about how large this cube is and how big this fireball is, like it's not going to be moving fast. Like it can't be moving fast. It's in, okay, fire in space, whatever. We'll let that slide, right? But the rest of it, layering in 2D elements that are, practically shot is what adds the feel to it, right? And then they gave us reference of, hey, this is the Borg fight we want to reference. And well, I'm sure you can imagine where that came from. So we're looking at that stuff and we're like, okay, so their color of their lasers is this color. And then this is how they have their light spread around. So it was basically like, a shot of love between 3D, 2D, all the supervisors, all the producers and everything to try to make it to be like the best shot ever, because the client trusted us with this huge shot. And they're like, hey, just so you know, this is the big one, so don't let us down.
Yeah, I thought that was a great shot, or a series of shots. This may seem silly, but I was actually impressed that the Borg phasers were tiny in scale. So they weren't big fat sausages flying out or anything like that. They were in scale, like you might see an Enterprise phaser be pretty large compared to the ship. But against the Borgs, they were little tiny lines. I mean, they did their job. You saw them and everything. You knew what was going on, but they were to scale. It was great. And then I know that final explosion shot, I was wondering, like, where is the Enterprise going to come from? Where is it going to come from? And then you took it right out of the fire, and the big, the shields are holding it and everything. It was cool. Really cool.
Yeah.
Good job. Good job.
Yeah. How about you, David? What comes to mind when you think, the most challenging thing you guys had to do on TNG?
Well, I wish I could say something as nearly as cool as what Rick did. I have some shots that I'm delighted that I've worked on. But as far as probably challenging, it's going to be one little shot that I was totally freaking out over. And that was the shot, one of the holodeck shots where Rick Fontaine, the James Darren character, he's talking to Odo, and he said, well, you need to get better duds, And Odo is wearing his brown suit, and he goes, oh, like this? And he comes up and he does this motion, and all of a sudden he's got a bow tie, and his suit turns into a tuxedo as he's talking and with us. And so it's all in motion. And so we were just going crazy trying to figure out how to do it. Usually the part that drives your composite is the person talking, and then everything else goes with that. So we got the part with Renee talking, and he did the motion, doing the tug and everything. Then he had to go put on the tuxedo. We had to come back, get him back into position, and have him go through the motion again with the tuxedo. But what wound up really driving it for us is we wound up having to use the tuxedo bow tie as the primary part, because that was where his hands had to land. And so ultimately, the dialogue was the first part we shot. I wound up having to put his head from the dialogue into the composite of the Odo suit into the tuxedo that was finally derived. And like I said, I was just like, oh God, this is like the worst shot ever. And of course, it turned out really well. But then they did the very last episode of DS9, What You Leave Behind, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically did not like the Odo shots because there was just all the CGI brown goo molasses kind of stuff going on. And so what do? They make a Odo planet. So now we're on an Odo planet with a little rock outcropping, and he walks out into this sea of goo that's off to infinity. So I have to deal with that and turn around, and I'll be danged if they didn't say, okay, we're going to have him do the tuxedo shot again. And I'm just going, oh God, no, please. So anyway, those two shots, I think, are the ones that make me groan the most. But I'll tell you, they were big hits with the fans.
I remember them both.
Oh, yeah. So do I. On top of it, when poor Rene Auberjonois, he was sick with the flu during the whole thing. I mean, during the initial one that we talked about on the holodeck. And so he was miserable, but he went through and he did take after take after take, and he changed clothes and did take after take after take, and never complained. What a pro. It was really good. He was in his 60s, late 60s, I think, when he did it. He had to go out on the set, and he was being merged into the goo, and he just got down and crunched up and rolled up. Turned out he was a yoga expert. And, man, if I ever did that, I'm not sure I'd ever get up again. But he did. It was, I'm going like, wow, he just folded right up and merged down in there and worked. I have another shot. Can I tell another shot that really wasn't a challenge?
Absolutely.
In a problem challenge? Okay, I really want to give a credit here. There was, do you remember the episode in DS9 where Dax is killed by Gul Dukat?
Of course.
And so he's got the power wraith energy and, blah, blah. And he fries her and holds her up and basically burns her up. Do you guys remember that? Did you see
Sure
that one,
did.
Rick? Okay. Terry Farrell had a labor dispute with Rick Berman, and she was not going to return. This was her last day, her last shot. And I'm on the set as the supervisor, and she's crying. And, they call her on the set. She'd blot her eyes and whatever she did to make sure she didn't have bloodshot eyes and go out and do her shot. Then she'd come back and be talking to people, and they're consoling her and everything. Well, anyway, they're going to do this shot, and they decided that they're going to raise her up on a rig. And so they put this leather harness around her hips and through, the crotch area and everything. And then the costume goes on that. And then there's a couple of buckles on the side that hoist her up with cables. Well, unfortunately, this thing is something out of the Dark Ages. It was real thick leather. So now all of a sudden her trim figure has now got this extra width to it. And she comes up to me and says, can you do something for me? I look horrible in this thing. And it was like, she just had her hips were really huge. I don't want to make jokes or stuff, but yeah, she looked really pretty bad. So she was just so upset. But I was so impressed with how professional she was. And she went out there, she did the shots, she did the whole thing. So what we did is we went back into digital magic, and we used liquid nitrogen. Rick, I don't know if you wind up ever using liquid nitrogen elements for your composites, but if you don't, you should take a look at those things that Dan Curry shot. A lot of those elements, it's really wonderful. It makes like vaporous gas and stuff. It's so it's really wonderful. So we use these little tendrils of liquid nitrogen, and we would turn them and sandwich them all around the outside of her, basically disguising her silhouette and covering it and making it the right color. So now when Gul Dukat fries her, all of this energy goes out and gets vapor and goes out into little vaporous tendrils and dissipates around her. And so she looked really great. And at a wrap party, she came up and gave me a great big hug and a thank you for saving her last shot. So there was a challenge, but not as in a bad challenge. It was something that was good to help the show, and it helped her personally. So
that's awesome. I was going to ask you about this because I remember you telling me this story years ago, and I was actually going to ask you about it. So
okay.
I'm glad you brought it up.
Thank you.
I want to talk about something else that I'm seeing a lot of parallels between the different eras, and that's virtual production. We're seeing this big push now for these LED screens on set, and I know they were used on Picard because I've seen some of the behind the scenes footage where like the star fields and the warp streaks on the Titan were done, practically on set. And to me, it's basically just a reinvention of front projection, rear projection. Rick, did that stuff make the job easier? Did it make it harder? And David, were there rear projection or front projection shots ever used in Trek? That we could draw the parallel between current VP technology and that technology in the past.
I seem to remember dimly that there were a couple of rear projection view screen shots for some particular reason, but primarily they were green screen. So if I go back, a decade earlier on Battlestar Galactica, they were using huge rear screen things that were generally overexposed and not effective at all. But that's ancient history. But I don't remember them doing much with rear screen or front projection on any of the TNG or Voyager or DS9. It was usually green screen.
Interesting. Do you think there might have been shots somewhere along the way that might have been great? Like if you could take a virtual production stage back in time with you, are there places where you could see that technology having been used on?
Oh gosh, yes. We always suffered with view screen eye lines because they always. I see Rick nodding his head. They always said, "Oh yeah, it's a 3D view screen." Yeah, but you're shooting at 2D. So we were often we you don't have the master plate of Captain Picard looking at the view screen left, and so sometimes you don't know which way the director's going to shoot that. So then when you do the close up of Admiral so-and-so talking to Captain Picard, you'd have to do a version of him looking to the left, you'd have to do a version of him looking to the right, and then you'd have to figure out which one worked so that they looked like they were looking at each other in 3D space. So having these new wonderful virtual screens, I think would have just been great. I would love to see one of those in person. And I know that I guess he got started on Gravity.
So Rick, were these was this technology deployed on Picard? Or
yeah, they did use some of it. I didn't have the opportunity to go on set to see any of it, but we got to see the plates that would come back from it. And kind of like what David's saying, like I think it depends on how you want to use it, because rear screen projection, translights, all that stuff. In practice, it sounds like it's really great, right? But if it's overexposed and it's out of focus and they're like, oh, hey, can we add some motion back there? Well, then you're screwed because you have to roto everybody anyway. So also on Picard, we had tons of blue screens and tons of green screens. It's places where they could use it, but they're like, we're not 100% sure what's going back there. So we're not going to put anything up. And to be honest, that was like the smartest call they could have made, because the thing you run into with these LED screens, one part is that they're really cool because you can put whatever you want up there and you get all the reflections on your surfaces, right? Until you have to change all those. Because if you have to change all those reflections on all the surfaces and you have people with hair, you get edges that get crazy. Like, can you imagine trying to do a warp tunnel shot and they're like, oh, actually, this isn't a warp tunnel anymore. It's supposed to be in like the jungle, everything, all the color changes, all the edges are horrible.
Oh.
So you're just like, well, why wouldn't you just put a green screen up? So I think there's give and take with it. Like they used it for some of the bridge shots when they're traveling through warp. Any of the other windows on the outside, you would see like the warp streaks. Works perfectly because that's exactly what they wanted it to be. But there are other shows where they use this projection stuff because the directors, whoever wants to see it on set, and they get really excited about it. But then they want to change the whole background. And it makes it harder and harder to do it than if they had just done it green screen in the first place.
I know each of you have worked on lower budget stuff. I know David's talked about working on some indie stuff, particularly here in Arizona. So Rick, what would you say, your relevant experiences? And let me also say, Rick and I both worked at a studio called Encore for a period when I was living in LA, and we worked on a lot of TV
I remember
stuff.
Those videos.
Yeah, absolutely. My vlog series that I did back then. Hard to believe it's 8 years ago now, but
oh wow, 8 years.
working in TV, as far as I'm concerned, is very, very similar to working in independent films, right? Because you never have enough time, you never have enough money. And, network TV is like that, the microcosm, where everything's got to happen, and it's got to happen in this truncated time frame. Not like a Marvel movie where, one compositor can work on one shot for 6 months. It's like, every compositor on a network TV show is working on dozens of shots, and they have to be done by the end of the week. So it just feels much more like an indie film type of schedule. So, Rick, anything that comes to mind, that's sort of like low to medium budget, where you had to pull a bunch of VFX tricks out of your hat to make them work?
Yeah, I would say the majority of the episodic stuff I've worked on kind of fall into that category. Only recently with the streaming ones, because the streaming ones, even though they don't come out all at once, like for Netflix, they try to finish those shows 6 to 8 months before they actually air. So I finished Picard season 3 last year, like way, way earlier last year. But for the ones that Paul's talking about, those things air the next week. So you have literally like a week to do everything. What happens with that is you have to be really smart with your tools, just your workflows, everything, and have a really good VFX supervisor on it that can look at everything at once and be like, okay, this is all we need to do for this shot. Next. What happens on these shows that you're mentioning, like Marvel and some of the bigger ones, is that you'll iterate on the same shot for weeks, months, when maybe it gets better, but maybe it gets worse. You don't know until the showrunner sees it and they approve it. But for the showrunners on television shows, they're like, okay, this is better than what I shot next. So because they don't have any time, like, because the problem that happens in television is, like you were saying, Paul, is like time and money. More time costs more money. And in TV land, if you're putting an entire company on overtime, it's insanely expensive. So they are just like us, and they're trying to be as efficient as possible. And if the shot works and it looks great, they will push that through first and then spend all the money on the big money shots.
David, does that jive with your experience?
Yeah. To give a little perspective, we had 7 weeks to do an episode. We were doing, I think, 27 episodes a season in those days. And so I had a show in post-production. I had a show in pre-production, I had a show in production, and I had a show in post-production all the time. And then, so you always had 3 shows that you were putting your mental and physical energy or creative energy into all season long. And I got the dubious joy once of when I segued off of Voyager onto DS9, I had 5 episodes I was working on simultaneously, which was really crazy. But
wow.
You really want to have good supervisors and that are thinking ahead. Yeah, so Rick's right on there with all of that. Yeah, absolutely.
For each of you, what's like a time saving or money saving trick that you might have picked up on a bigger budget project like a Star Trek that then you've subsequently applied to a smaller budget show, or that you would apply to a smaller budget show in the future?
Biggest thing for me is kind of what David mentioned earlier, storyboarding. When you have shots that you're unsure of what it needs to look like, just start drawing some stuff out and get it over to them early. Because trying to do animatics in 3D, sure, like people are really great in Unreal now, right? But it just takes a lot of time. You can hire a storyboard artist and have like an entire scene done in a couple of days, get approval on it, and then you already know that you're working towards something that the director wants. Because what happens sometimes is you spend way too much time trying to make something look really good, and then they don't want that at all.
Yeah, Rick's right on. The biggest challenge, at least when working with independents, and like out here in Arizona, is the lack of preparedness and reflected in storyboards. You heard me a few minutes ago say the same thing. It's like, I'm a big storyboard guy. I draw terrible storyboards, but when you look at them, you can tell where the composition is. You can tell where things need to be. My storyboards, if I need a 24 millimeter lens, my storyboard looks like it's a shot with a 24 millimeter lens. And so having that kind of a skill set is really important. I actually had a situation even recently. Somebody could, well, I want you to do a shot for me. Well, what is it? Well, it's this, this, and this. I said, well, send me a storyboard. Never got a storyboard. We finally got together and we're going to shoot it. And we were drawing the storyboards before we shot. So, it's like, I don't know what we're doing. I can't tell you what you're going to need. I have no idea what you have in your mind. Those are the things that really came through in Star Trek. I mean, I immediately started storyboarding. I immediately started talking to took my boards and talked to the post-production supervisor, Peter Lauritsen. Sometimes I'd even go over and talk to the editor and say, here's what I'm thinking about doing. And they say, oh yeah, we can do that. Or can be thought about this. And then of course, a lot of times I'd send storyboards over to the companies that we would, subcontract to, Digital Magic or, Foundation Imaging, some of those different companies, because they have to figure out what they're going to bid in order for me to put my bid in. And my people always wanted bids done like instantly. And so, anything that you can do to communicate and have clarity is going to be valuable. And that whether it's on a Star Trek or whether it's an independent. And I'm going to say that the less money you have, the less time you have, the more critical those things become.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'd agree.
I have clients all the time, or prospective clients, ask me, this is what I want to do. How much is it going to cost? And I'm like, I need to see something.
Yeah.
I know you haven't shot it yet, but what,
Yeah.
Is it this big on screen, or is it, a hero element? Yeah. What is it? I need to know.
Yeah. I think the part that also dovetails into that is doing like look dev or style frames. Because sometimes you'll work with directors that they have a hard time looking at storyboards, especially, if they don't look like much. But having somebody that can do conceptual art or style frames, in addition to those, where they're like, this is how you guys want to shoot it, right? But this is what it's actually going to look like, or something like that, is really good to show them too, just to get their head wrapped around it.
Okay, so that probably covers my next question, which was, what do filmmakers consistently get wrong about working with VFX regardless of the budget? Right. So other than not being prepared enough, what's another thing? And when I say filmmaker, I could mean directors, I could mean showrunners, I could mean producers. What's other than not being prepared enough with previs, if you will, storyboards, planning, whatever, what's something else that filmmakers or clients get wrong about the visual effects process that you've noticed? And it consistently, regardless of the budget level.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an open question to that, but I think it's the limitations in visual effects based on how much time they have, right? Because sometimes, like, you can look at something and be like, "Wow, they did this so fast." You're like, "Yeah, they had 150 people on it." Like if it's a small company, like having realistic expectations of like ask these questions like, "Hey, can you guys do something like this?" Because sometimes there isn't that dialogue. They're like, we really want this, this, and this. This is how much money we have. And you're like, well, I want to say no, but I also want you as a client. So why don't we jump on a call and talk through it? What is it that you actually need? And this is what we're able to give you. Because sometimes those are completely different. And once you start seeing eye to eye with each other and be like, okay, this actually needs to air soon. We can do this, this, and this. What do you think? They're like, oh yeah, that sounds great. How about we try this? Just getting that dialogue like early on, because I mean, sure, we can do anything in visual effects, but it costs a lot of money and it can take a lot of time. And just realizing expectations between the vendor and and the visual effects company.
Yeah, as I always say, good, fast, cheap. Pick two.
Oh yeah, I've got a drawing of that thing right here next to me. I think there has been sort of a change in the attitude toward visual effects. I remember being on set, and often I was considered to be an obstacle to production. Okay. And so they didn't want to do visual effects very much because, one, we're going to take too much time, we're going to slow down production, and we're going to cost a lot of money. And then a lot of times, they would want to do stuff like my, remember original glass map paintings? Producer came up to Matthew Urasich and said, I really would like to fly around and go around to the back of the painting, see what the back of the building looks like. Of course, that's a two-dimensional piece of glass on top of some primer. And of course, now with digital, you can do that. With 3D modeling and stuff, you literally can fly around a two-dimensional thing fabricated into 3D space. So what happens now is there's the assumption that we can do anything. Well, again, with money and with time and, 500 people working on this, on the show. Yes, you can do a lot of stuff. So I think there's a tendency to want to dump stuff into, the old, let's fix it in post. It's like everything's post now, even during production. Like it's like, oh, wait, well, you guys can track it. We don't need to do a motion control. We don't need to shoot, the tilt angles or anything. You guys can figure it all out. Yeah, but, it's going to cost money. So I see that as being a tendency and a trend. And of course, I definitely see it here as people don't have a lot of experience. The other thing I think is I wanted to bring up is people don't get the visual effects artist supervisor involved early enough. And so they think, oh, well, we're just going to shoot this. We'll call somebody in when we need them. And, by that time, sometimes they're in real trouble. And then the other thing is just not taking advice.
So to summarize, plan your shots, involve VFX as early as possible, and take our advice.
Yeah, don't surprise us. Don't try to do our job for us. Don't surprise us.
Right. Fix it in pre, don't fix it in post.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other part of that swings around to being to the director. Decide, make decisions. Because I know I won't say I know. I guess I could guess that Rick probably is one of these things where, okay, well, this looks pretty good. Can you go ahead and do another version of it for us? And can you make it a little greener? Can you make that a little redder? Can you adjust this thing? How about blowing it up a little bit? Oops, that's too big. Can you make it a little smaller? I don't know. You run into that at all, Rick? Endless variations and permutations?
Yeah, of course. I mean, and because I work for multiple vendors, it's like we have our internal supervisors, we have our internal VFX supervisors, and then it goes to the show supervisor. And if it passes the show supervisor, then it goes to the showrunner, and then all the EPs look at it. So it's like you have like 7 different people it's got to get through first before it gets to the person that actually makes the decision. So somebody down the line could be changing it and like being like, yeah, that's the thing that I wanted. And then the person above them is like, what did you do? This is nothing.
This is nothing like what I wanted. Yeah.
Yeah.
I worked on a feature film like that. I said, who is the final authority? And the production manager said, I am going to be your authority. And I had it in the contract. It turned out I was giving him shots. He was approving them. He never showed them to the director. He finally showed them all. The director said, I hate everything. Months and months and months of work. The final person never saw anything.
Yeah, I've encountered similar problems too, where particularly on TV movies, you have a producer, maybe a director if they're still connected to the movie. Sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
It's they're guns for hire and they're gone, and a producer is approving, and then the executive producer has to chime in and they make a bunch of changes, and then it has to go to the network. I actually prefer that over the client, the client where you have one point of contact, but they don't know what they want. The client, I don't know what I want, but I'll know it when I see it.
Yeah. 12 variations. You go back to number 1.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've been there, done that one.
That's never good.
Yeah.
Where do you guys see the VFX industry in 10 years? And I know this is a loaded question because there's a lot of stuff going on in our industry.
Well, right now, the biggest hot thing around the block is AI. So AI is doing amazing things. And I think the people that are able to utilize it in ways that I'll say make sense are going to be ones that succeed. There are companies out there right now that are using AI to do things like redub movies, and so they have the mouth lines up to all the different languages. That's kind of cool technology. Like, I don't want to do that frame by frame. I don't think anybody wants to do that frame by frame. So if you can teach a computer to do that, that's based on how the artist would do it. That's pretty cool, man. And then you see the things like the deep fakes, where people are doing facial replacements. That type of work is super hard. Any beauty work, Paul, I know you did some with us at Encore. Any beauty work is really, really painstakingly tough. And anything you can use to make that go smoother, if it's AI based, if it's machine learning based, whatever that is, that's going to make you more efficient and better at what you do. So I think being able to utilize these new technologies to help you be more efficient at your job is going to be able to make you more creative, because nobody wants to roto something. If you can have a machine do it, then you can focus on the creative part and have more fun. I'm really curious to see where AI takes all of our technologies, because even the programs I use right now, we have machine learning and AI built into them, and you can use that, and it's kind of exciting, kind of scary at the same time, but I'm optimistic.
Yeah, that's great.
Right on. I agree. AI is definitely going to be part and parcel of what we do going forward. And a lot of people are, naysayers, and they say, oh, that the RIP visual effects artists, or RIP art directors, or whatever. And it's like, guys, horses did not go extinct when Henry Ford invented the Model T.
Yeah.
Like,
you're just going to have VFX people that are going to interface possibly and probably very differently than they do now. So what I see, I'm really impressed with what Rick's coming up with there, and I hadn't really thought it out in terms of AI, but yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. I think the work is just going to get better and better. It's been amazing, from like some of the early Art Star things and the early Lightwave things to what we're doing now. Truly phenomenal. And so I'm actually very excited to see what else you come up with, because when I see shots like what Rick's been working on, or you've been working on, Paul, that's the sort of stuff that if I could have done it, I would have gotten Academy Awards back in the day, and you guys do it day by day, just matter of factly. And this stuff is just so amazing. And yeah, so it's good. Once again, even with AI, it may make the process faster, but I'm going to circle this back around. It still comes back. A lot of the issues are still going to come back to the director and the creators of the shows. They need to have their act together. They need to be able to make decisions and articulate in a way that would allow the new up-and-coming visual effects people to interface with them and with the software that's coming.
Absolutely. AI is only as good as the prompt from the human operator, right?
Yeah.
So as long as we have clients out there who don't know what they want, but they'll know it when they see it, AI is no threat.
You might be able to program some variations a little faster than what we might have done at this point in time.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I super agree with what David's saying. Like the quality, like seeing where the quality goes, right? I'm going to plug Avatar, because when Avatar came out, like nobody knew what it was going to look like, right? And now we have the newest one, The Way of the Water. I think my brain shut off like in the first 10 minutes of that movie, where I was like, okay, they know how to make water and all this stuff is just amazing. And then I just watched the movie, like you forget that like all of that water is completely fabricated. You forget that these characters they're just in like little suits, like underwater, like trying to breathe with rigs and all kinds of crazy stuff. Like if you see any of the behind the scenes for that movie and you see what like Weta and ILM and what they did, you're just like, oh my God. That's what they did for this movie. Their technology is already better for the next movies, right? And all of that technology comes down to television and stuff that you guys are working on right now. We're using deep compositing on these TV shows, which was developed for Avatar. Weta was using deep for a long time, and they're like, oh, now Nuke just uses deep always, and so seeing that technology is really exciting, because wherever that stuff goes, it all rolls down to everybody else. So seeing the quality of television shows like Game of Thrones looks like a movie, but they're doing that on like television, quote unquote budgets, but timelines, and they're able to push that stuff out. So what do TV shows look like in the next 5 years, next 10 years? Like they're going to look amazing. People are figuring out how to use this technology and make it, and bring all these crazy stories to life. And to me, I think that's the best part. That's just the most exciting, to see what people can do.
Yeah, I consider myself as being fairly visually savvy, and I'm always delighted to find shots that I know are trick shots and I can't tell where the trick is. I can't tell exactly what is real, what is not real, unless it's something obvious like a dragon or something. But a lot of like the scene replacements, face replacements, I mean, all of this work that goes into making a production, it's, the old classic invisible art, the invisible effects. And it's just getting better and better. And for old dogs like me, it gets harder and harder to catch the tricks.
Well, that is an absolutely perfect place to wrap up. So I want to thank you, gentlemen, for being part of this podcast.
Well, thank you.
It's been a very, very special hour talking with you. I appreciate your time and expertise always.
Thank you.
Of course. Lots of fun. Thanks for having us.
Where can people find you online if they want to see what you've been working on or just want to, catch up with you?
Rick?
I actually don't have a website.
What?
But if you want to check out my Vimeo, it's Rick's VFX, RICKS VFX. On Vimeo, you can see some reels, some of the stuff I've been working on. And find me on Facebook and LinkedIn.
Cool.
Fantastic. David, how about you?
I'm on Facebook, just David Stipes. But I have davidstipes.com, which is kind of probably my last vestiges of a website. I haven't really done a lot, but you can see a lot of my really old work if you want to see antique stuff. But what I'm more proud of is davidstipes.net. And that's an actual writing blog. And I have a lot of articles and I talk about behind the scenes things. And I'm going to be adding more content to that. I've got probably close to 30 articles I've done. I'm going to be adding more of them to the blog. So I'm trying to document what behind the scenes while I can. So
fantastic. And I will make sure to bookmark that.
Okay.
Because
and Rick, when you can, I would recommend documenting anything that you're working on, because people will find it interesting in the future, and it does tend to fade away if you don't get it down quickly. I'm sorry, Paul, I jumped on you there.
That's all right. But David's right. You're part of Star Trek now, buddy. So, future historians of the Trek franchise will be talking about the exploits of Rick Ravenell, 2D supervisor at Outpost.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly going to be talking about you.
All right. Well, thanks so much, gentlemen. And thanks to our audience for tuning in today. If you liked what you saw here, if you learned something, I want to hear from you. So please like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you on the next installment of the VFX for Indies podcast.